Welcome, Sue Robinson. On behalf of the Brotherhood of Elders Network, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us. As a network of intergenerational African American men in Oakland, we are very concerned and very invested in Oakland and the success of Oakland, specifically for the generations who are coming up behind us. So we really appreciate you taking the time to share your perspectives, your experiences, and your goals. You are a candidate for mayor of Oakland, California in the special election, which will be April 15th. And so I would love to hear from you. Just share with us a little bit about your experience, your public service, and how you got into politics.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been working at the intersection of business and public policy since 2009. I work right now as the Vice President of Governance and Stakeholder Engagement for an organization called the Bay Area Council. And that's a political advocacy group. We also have an economic institute, and we work with a broad business community in the Bay Area. So I've been in the epicenter of a lot of these issues for quite a while. And in terms of my background, wow, I think I've worked in every sector. I've worked for big business, I've worked for startups, I have worked for little organizations, nonprofit, and I've also served as the chair of a nonprofit organization for HIV and AIDS, working with mostly people in the recovery space, addiction recovery space, doing wilderness therapy too. So that's been really interesting. I think there's synergy there with the program you were talking about earlier. Wow, nature is so healing, right? And especially when you're going through a program like that. So tough issues though, addiction, really tough issues. We had a lot of issues come up where I had to learn the hard way. You really have to put the right people in charge of solutions, especially we had some volunteers relapse, and we had to get some of our organization directors on the board to help us with policy changes. And it's something I identify with Oakland a lot because we have a lot of heart in Oakland, but we've also been accused of being enablers. And I had the chance to see that a little bit with addiction, where it's like you really do have to lean in on people who've been through it before and understand the process, and lean in on them, especially in the policy side too. So I have a lot of experience with I've been a whitewater rafting volunteer guide, and I faced some really big whitewater. I went to South Africa and Zimbabwe and the Zambezi River, huge whitewater. And that's where I learned how to face the danger. When you're rafting, you gotta scout the rapid, and you're just standing there looking at it, and it's like, whew, I gotta go into that. Everybody gets really, you get afraid because you're looking down at this massive water, realizing you gotta go back down and get in your boat and go into that. And they have a saying in Africa, face the danger. You got to turn your boat at it, and you got to power right into it, and you got to go hard, because the more power you have when you face those big waves, the more likely you are to get through them without flipping and a lot of problems. So I learned a lot on the mighty Zambezi, and I apply those principles to leadership. We've got lots of problems here, and we got to face them. We can't play politics with these issues. They really do impact people's lives, and people are getting killed on the streets of our city, and politics is not acceptable, when we live in this and realize the impact, So we got to face these issues and what they really are, right? And shine a light on it and get down deep into what's going on and get well as a city, because I think everything depends on that, So I hope, does that answer your question?
No, it does.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the multiple perspectives. I also think that as you were talking, I was thinking, I agree. In order to face problems, you got to take them head on. You have to fortify yourself to lean in. But people don't do that if they aren't committed, right? And so share with us a little bit about what you love about Oakland, which really kind of orients you to lean into the hard work.
Yeah, we had a thing happen in my neighborhood in 2017 and totally changed my life. We had somebody killed, basically, and it was pretty devastating. And before that, I was just kind of doing my thing. I was going to work, coming home. I don't even know if I knew my neighbors that well. And when that happened, it just was devastating, and it changed my life. And I realized, like, I can't be living this way anymore, you know. So I started getting involved in public safety, started working, you know, being with some of the families, and that's hard. It's so hard, you know. People have been devastated by loss, and to be there to see one of my neighbors lost her son, you know, and she invited me to his 23rd birthday party a year after. And brave, such a brave woman. You know, you really meet people who are the bravest people I've ever met, and she is. So that's what really brings it home, I think, is like, that's why I say this isn't about politics, you know. When you're in that, it just changes your whole lens. You're like, we can't play these games. You know, the games that we've seen played sometimes in Oakland, it's like, no. You know, it's too real to the people and the families that have gone through the consequences of that. And so it's like we have an imperative to solve these problems. People are counting on us, you know. It's not like it's just not a game to me. You know, I think that's what it is. It's like I'm frustrated by politics, if I'm honest about it, because I think the maneuvering and the games and such that people are playing really do impact everyone. And so I guess hopefully that answers your question, yeah.
So I love Oakland too. And I think Oakland deserves, you know, strong leadership. We as the Brotherhood of Elders Network accept that it takes many of us to do it, right? The mayor won't be able to fix all the problems. We can't leave it to the mayor, but we do need strong leadership. And so what makes you that right candidate for mayor of Oakland?
Great question, and thanks for asking these good questions, you know. Well, look, I've worked at the intersection of business and public policy, and I know how the sausage is made, you know, and so I understand and I can anticipate political things, and I think that makes me a good candidate. Number one, I don't like politics very much, and I'm frustrated by what they've done to our city. Number two, I know when politics are happening. I'm savvy and educated enough on the space to understand the intentions, the things going on, to fend off politics for our city. And finally, I'm a bold leader, you know. I'm not afraid to stand up for this city, and I'm not afraid to stand up to different factions in the city if necessary. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't think it's ever a good idea to kind of like take a stand unless it's a good idea, unless there's a reason for it. You know, the number one pursuit is to try to get synergy and try to get partnership. I think honestly, you know, there's a lot of mudslinging in Oakland in this political space. And when I look at a lot of the people, a lot of our elected leaders, I see people who have different passions, you know. You look at council and you see different people with different passions. And I'm a big believer in systems management, where it's like you got to figure out, it's like if you look at a clock and you think about how the mechanisms work. If you take a mechanism out, it works, it's just a mechanism, right? But if you fit it into a clock in such a way that these mechanisms work together, they end up creating time, basically, right? So if we look at the leaders of the city, including our community leaders, you have to recognize what people are passionate about, what they care about, and where to deploy them to fit into that whole system. And so what ends up happening, if you can do that, is you end up with independent parts, because people like being independent, but you can get them working together under these shared objectives and goals that kind of, we're going to do this, and you're going to do that piece as a mechanism, because you're passionate about it. And over here, you'll do this, which is very different, but you're passionate. And if we can get them all working in their own ways, and what's great about systems like that is everyone ends up winning. They get to win at their passion and take credit for it, right? It's like the system wins or loses together. So if one fails, we all fail. And that's how you have to design it, which I think is a different kind of an architecture than we have. We have a lot of things that are siloed, and they're really not working together that well. And they end up fighting each other all the time. And since I don't like politics, I can see that and say, like, what are we fighting over? Okay, like, you know, if we tackle these issues together and figure out what everyone's going to do, that moves the system forward. people want to win. Politicians want to win. They don't want to show up at election time failures. So progress is critical for all of us, really. And I think it's an important distinction between coming into a highly political place where everyone's screaming and yelling at each other and accusing people of being progressives or right wing or whatever the accusations are. Let's just get rid of all that. Let's focus on Oakland, okay? Because everybody they care about this city. There is no leader at the top of this city that doesn't care about this city, I don't think, you know. So how do you bring that out and get it working right is the question, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that leads me to my next question, which is, you know, as the mayor of Oakland, there's a saying, the mayor has to be able to count to 5, right? And so to get anything passed at the city council level, the mayor doesn't have a vote, but needs city council to be able to put policies in place to then implement and execute. And so we are, as you know, we are in a terrible budget situation right now. And it's changing every day, but not necessarily getting better. So what is your plan? How do you see yourself working with the current city council? And what are your strategies to close the budget deficit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So number one, you know, by the time the mayor gets in office, the budget's already going to be launched. So we have to keep that in mind too. It'll more like be, what is the budget? Because May 1 is when the budget goes to council, and then it's out of the mayor's hands at that point. But I understand the point of your question, and it's like, ultimately, the crisis that we're facing is a tremendous opportunity, because when you're in a mode like this, it does unite people. So when economic times are good, you're going to find a lot more people unwilling to work together. But when we have a situation like this, as I said, you win or lose together. It's a tremendous opportunity because these council members are looking for help and solutions right now in ways they never were before. And the way I see our situation is we have a revenue problem in the general fund, so we got to get the revenue up in this city. And we don't even have a business plan in Oakland. The plan expired 5 years ago. I've been talking a lot about it because it frustrates me. I don't see how we get revenue into this city if we don't even have a plan to get revenue. And I do think that Oakland's kind of like waiting around for San Francisco, right? What are we doing if we don't have a plan? The other thing is like, I think that like cities like ours, we just don't understand how to do this because business has always been good here. And now we're facing an unprecedented commercial real estate collapse. So ultimately, what we got to do is go out there and get businesses back into our city and figure out what to do with these empty office buildings. It's going to require someone with business development skills to go knock down. You got to be proactive. Like, you can't just wait around for something, you know? So we have to be proactive. The other thing is, like, we're competing with these cities around us, you know? They're stealing our businesses. They're taking advantage of our weaknesses, and they're stealing our businesses. I mean, we're seeing our big companies shrink their footprints and grow in Emeryville, or businesses go to Castro Valley. Like, we have to wake up, okay? These cities are all facing similar office vacancy issues, and they're looking at us as like, you know, a predator in the wilderness, I think. They're like, ooh, let's go get their businesses, right? They're down. So we're going to have to fly into action from day one with a business competitiveness plan. I plan on hiring a chief of economic development and housing, because there's a lot of focus on conversion of those office buildings to housing in the downtown core. And that can be with a tax increment finance district, or it can be, you know, basically just kind of like working with developers and figuring out like what they're thinking about and how we develop the downtown core. It's also like about waiving taxes. We have like a gross receipts tax, so there's an opportunity there to get people back in the downtown core by saying to companies like, we'll give you 50% discount on gross receipts if you bring your employees back 4 days a week. And if you bring them back 5 days a week, we'll waive 100% gross receipts tax and get people that are then going to pump up the retail sector, and we'll be making sales tax on that. So it's like, this is the value of like a business plan. It's where you figure out, well, we can give up money here, and then we're going to get money over here. So you have to do that kind of strategic mapping to figure out what kind of deals should we be making with people whose leases are expiring to keep them in the building. What kind of deals do we make when we go out and recruit business to our city? But the other thing about our revenue issues is like, we got to fix the public safety issues because nobody is going to come back to Oakland. So I think the mayor of this city has to come out really strong after this election and rebrand our city immediately. And just be like, because we're being viewed as an anti-business city who hasn't changed and an unsafe city. So the election itself, the special election, is a vehicle to rebrand Oakland and to send a very powerful message to businesses that we are open for business, right? From day one, we have to come out really strong with a strong message to change how we are regarded and make it clear that the whole world has changed in Oakland. We're different. We've changed. Here we go, right?
I like that. I really would. I want to go a little bit further down that road. So that question that I didn't ask was, what would you do to improve the fiscal outlook moving forward? And you actually answered a lot of your responses covered that. So I want to ask you kind of what would the city look like if you were successfully elected and were able to implement some of these business strategies. What would our fiscal outlook look like moving into the next budget cycle? So what would you hope we would look like in fiscally here in Oakland?
Yeah, so what I don't like about Oakland is that it's all helter-skelter. We're selling off our assets with no strategy. We're selling the Coliseum. We're selling Howard Terminal. What are we doing? What's the plan, right? I mean, a lot of people want to get sports industries back here. So we have to come together immediately and determine our future, right? And that's what I believe in. It's like, I don't want to focus on survival mode. I want to focus on a bold vision where we separate ourselves from San Francisco, we come out big, and we create the city that we've always wanted to be, a world-class city. I see this city as going from what one reporter called us the trash can of the East Bay and transforming Oakland into the cleanest and greenest city on earth. Because I see that's what we're trying to be. We're building bike lanes everywhere, we're electrifying the port, we're focused on clean energy, clean air, and people don't want coal here. So we see kind of like what we're trying to become as a city on the business side of it. And I think we just need to become that. We have these empty office buildings, so we should go after the businesses we want to be in Oakland that reflect our unique identity. The other aspects of this city that I think are undervalued, they're not really developed well, is we have the largest cluster of LGBTQ+ in the entire country, I think, if not the world. And that's an incredible asset because there's a huge regional market and we can attract people here for that sector. And we have a Black community and we have also Black history here. We're the birthing place of the civil rights movement. And when you look at the way that our historical monuments have been undervalued in Oakland, I think there was like was 7th Avenue Walk where these bronze plates were stolen and nobody even knew about it, and this old jazz club. And we have these different monuments, that are a testament to the history of that community. So I think that's an incredible asset in the city. Nobody else has that, or if they do have it, it's a unique asset. So I would love to see us revitalize these historic monuments, and I'd love to see us promote that. We don't really have a focus in the city on tourism. And it's one of those things where we just think, oh, San Francisco's tourism, and we'll just, but we started to see, like in 2017, kind of a revitalization of some of these things and more of a focus and more monuments being built. So I think there's huge opportunity to grow that community, to grow our Black community more. I know you guys are working on the 40 by 40 project, and that's about anchoring the community here and making sure we don't lose that community. But I think there's a business opportunity there too on the tourist side to really kind of like look at these monuments, and we got to have books, we should have apps, we should have things that get people to our city and are like, we're going to go do that walk or that trail, and here's the app. We have to be thinking about what the assets of the city are and how we can market that so we can become a place people want to come to, right? Both in the regional market, which people kill for our regional market, and also in a bigger market, where we can be drawing people here. So looking at the assets that we have, and the other thing about that too I want to mention is like, we can make a case to revitalize these areas on the revenue side by promoting that as a part of our business plan, right? Like if we look at what our unique assets are, then we can go and say, hey, if we invest money in these revitalizing these monuments or these districts, because I know the LGBTQ plus is working on different arts and culture things for that community side too. So I think there's a big opportunity. And then looking at our assets from a land use, can we get our sports teams back? Because that's another draw where we can draw people here to Oakland and kind of create our unique identity, you know?
Thank you. You led me right into my next question. This is easy. And so, as you mentioned, Oakland is a very diverse city with a lot of rich history. And we've seen most recently some of our community-based organizations losing the committed funding that they had initially been promised from the city based on our budget situation. We have seen, for example, the Black Arts Corridor be identified but not necessarily funded. And so how do you see yourself in the role of mayor equitably supporting the diverse communities of Oakland?
Yeah, great question. That does play off on my other answer, because I've been thinking a lot about that because, you know, arts and culture is one of the first things that are cut in economic crisis. So, you know, from my perspective, we have to monetize things in order to sell them internally, right? I mean, even the mayor is just like has to go into the inner workings of the city and the council and sell it. And so we need a business plan that includes our unique assets like our Black cultural districts. We also need to work on expanding that, by the way, because I don't think it's inclusive of West Oakland. We're working on East Oakland, and you guys were talking about the other day and kind of tying West Oakland stuff in too. And then, you know, there's the sort of like arts and cultural part of that. So it's really kind of like the way Oakland looks at organizational investment in the past has been pretty all over the place, right? And it's very hard to sell that. It frustrates the public because they don't understand it and they don't understand the value of it, and they get angry because the money disappears. There's a lot of competition for resources. And then there's politics involved of people who like certain things and they get accused of special interests. So from my perspective, we need to clean it all up and have a cohesive business plan that includes, like I was mentioning, the unique assets of the city that we want to grow. And that also includes the revenue upside of those, right? Arts and culture has a revenue upside if we were to focus on tourism, for example. It's something I don't think the city focuses on. So instead of just arts and culture everywhere, it should be more of a focused initiative about where and how we apply arts and culture in Oakland so that we can monetize that. And for example, if we're gonna brand ourselves as, you know, the place to go to really touch base with civil rights history or with the Black community or with the LGBTQ plus community, or if we're gonna have our sports teams back, whatever we decide collectively are the assets we're gonna sell, within that has to be the arts and culture model of how we really like bring those assets out so that they really pop and that people want to engage with them. And I do see a lot of our historic sites pretty run down looking, you know, and it doesn't make any sense because they're incredibly valuable assets to the city. So those are areas you can sell, right? You can make a list of these things and talk about how there's a revenue upside to that. And then you go in the city and you make a case for it. And it's a lot easier to get that through than it is if it's everywhere and everyone's fighting over everything. And it doesn't really align with the plan. You know what I mean?
Yes. You know, I heard a saying that all politics is local. And with the national landscape and the pivots that cities and counties and higher education institutions are having to make based on some of the things coming from the federal level, as mayor, how would you make sure that Oakland citizens could engage City Hall in a meaningful way?
So let me make sure I understand that, because I heard you say something about education and federal cuts to education, and
yes,
how does that tie into engagement?
Yeah, so the question is really about how can Oakland citizens, how will you ensure as mayor that Oakland citizens can engage City Hall to get their questions asked, to get their needs met, especially when the landscape nationally is shifting so quickly?
Yeah, that's a complex question. You know, it's like we have a process. Look, if you want my honest opinion, I think we need to overhaul our government from the inside. I think it's an antiquated system. It is structured to be incredibly slow-moving and ridiculously slow-moving. I mean, it is not acceptable, for example, for our police department to have a plan for upgrading technology that takes 2 years. I'm not talking about upgrading the technology. I'm talking about just coming up with a plan to upgrade the technology. So imagine how long it's going to take to upgrade the tech. We've got police officers sitting in their cars all day filling out paperwork. So you're going to take 2 years to come up with a plan, and how long is it going to take you to raise the money to actually upgrade the tech? Another 2 years? I mean, imagine how long that takes. By the time they upgrade the tech, it's already going to be out of date, the way the tech industry moves. So the government is not structured correctly for the 21st century. And, you know, there's a couple things going on with that. One of them is reevaluating the charter itself and, like, how do we do things as a government? And not being scared to do that, because this is the way it's always been. But we also have a thing in Oakland where we have too many committees that are being piled on. And really the purpose of a lot of these committees is to create political cover so that politicians don't have to be responsible for decisions. You can dump it onto the commission or the committee, and then you don't have to make the decisions. The citizens do. So if anything goes wrong, it's on the citizens, right? And the politician never has to be a leader and just take the hits, because leadership is about taking hits and taking bows. So we have 40 committees, and, like, it's just gotten crazy, and the city isn't doing anything. They can't move. They don't move. We saw this with the police pursuit policy. They still haven't changed our police pursuit policy. It's like the most extreme policy in the United States of America. We know what we need to change about it, and it will still be an extreme policy when we change 2 things about it, right? We're going to let our officers chase if there's a felony, not just a violent felony. And we're going to remove this clause that makes them call their manager for approval, which we know you're never going to get your manager on the phone in time to approve chasing somebody, right? So we know what the policy needs to be changed. It could be changed in 2 weeks, but they're going through this process that takes 2 years to eradicate accountability in case there's an accident. And guess what? They're going to talk about how the voters approved that policy, so it's not their fault. You know, this is really something that is a problem here. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think we need a government overhaul in this city, and I think it needs to be thoughtful. I don't believe in just going in and, you know, we have to have a carefully constructed, you know, we have to go in with a consultant in organizational structure, talk to people internally, and have a carefully constructed plan. But it's not really working well for us here. You know what I mean? It's like, it can't be. And on the education side, because I think we should talk about that, you know, I think we have a problem with education with the Supreme Court ruling, and now universities cannot kind of like make sure they have diversity within the university anymore, like they're not allowed to. So what's been happening is a lot of foundations are taking that on with scholarships. So I think it's a really good area to kind of understand and focus on when it comes to inclusion, like building an inclusive economy and making sure that everyone has access to that economy. Because engaging with government is sometimes about education too, right? You know, like if you don't really understand your system and you haven't really had exposure to it. So I just wanted to put that education piece in it, because it's kind of important on the national scene with what we're seeing and the concerns about, you know, what's going to happen to our efforts for a more inclusive economy, especially in a diverse city like Oakland. I think that we have to focus on education scholarships and working with employers and foundations who can provide more support than the universities are going to be legally allowed to, right, with these new like rulings.
So as mayor of Oakland, how would you make sure we have diverse population, as we mentioned, and diverse agendas and different perspectives? And so as mayor, how would you make sure you were accessible to the citizens of Oakland so that you could make sure you were hearing directly from them their needs, which would then you would potentially translate into policy or administrative procedures or other actions? How would you make sure you're accessible to Oakland citizens and residents?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, the mayor has to be out here in the community, and you got to be talking to people and organizations like this. And I think, one of the things that's kind of missing in our city are feedback loops. And I don't think in terms of technology and capability, we don't have good tech on the inside of Oakland that would allow us to do like an annual survey. Most people have a database. I don't think Oakland has this. It's crazy. And you have all your different stakeholders, and then you have different feedback loops so that you can collect information. And I think one thing that's missing here is, number one, having an annual process to make sure what we're working on as a government aligns with the community. So that would be like, you would start with a feedback loop. What are your issues? What are your top issues? And collect it. And then go to council and decide what we're going to focus on, because you can't do everything. You have to boil it down. But in terms of accessibility, it's like a mayor has to be, available, accessible, talking to people, talking out there on the streets, talking to people. Every opportunity when you have an event, you should just kind of talk to people. I've often thought about just randomly talking to people too, taking a list of all your employees and randomly selecting a person to have lunch with. There's all kinds of little things you can do, but utilizing tech when you're running a city of like 450,000, is a good way to get feedback also, is by creating better loops to collect information from and making sure you're in touch with what people care about, that you're not in a silo,
So as we see cuts happening at the city level, programs and services, what role do you see the county playing in making sure we can backfill some of the services and programs that may be cut? And what role would you see yourself playing as mayor to build that partnership?
Yeah, I brought this up in another debate because this really relates to health and wellness, and it relates to a lot of other work. But the city and the county need a better relationship in Oakland. They kind of have a history of seeming more like competitors sometimes than they are partners. So the other thing I've noticed is that we have this problem where they come out with these plans, and then after a couple years they just drop them. Like the homeless plan the county had, and it's like, well, what happened to that? And there's terrible communication to the public on it, certainly. Like, there's no alignment really with everyone following along what we're doing. Are we winning? Are we losing? You can't just build a plan and drop it and pretend like you didn't have a plan, because it breaks trust with people. So there's opportunity to heal the relationship. I think we need to work with the county on homelessness. I've been pitching this Care Campus model. People are working on building a campus for our unsheltered, and it's a model that exists in San Antonio. It exists in Reno. During COVID, they built the campus model. And it's basically like a place where you have a very large shelter and all the services are consolidated on the campus. And your mental health, your addiction recovery services, your workforce services. And there's phases of the project. You surround the campus with interim housing. And Reno last year completed phase 3 of permanent supportive housing. The benefit to that model is that we're going to stop running around chasing after things, and we'll have a consolidated place where services are. And that facility needs to be run by the county, which they have money for. They have Measure W money, they have Prop 1 resources to operate it. And so it's a good project to collaborate with the county on and to actually start winning on the homelessness side, because we're just leaving people on the streets with no help. And in this model, the infrastructure would be there for the people to get help, right? It's all there for them so they can walk over there and get help. And they don't have to really look around for stuff anymore or feel like they're not getting the help they need. So people don't understand this is a viable project. It is a viable project. And the other thing is, it's like, the governor is starting to change on homelessness, and we're hearing that he also is looking for out-of-the-box solutions. So the mayor also has access to the governor and can, this could be a really good project for city and county and even the governor to be involved in, if he had an appetite for it, to prove the model in Oakland and Alameda County and work together as partners, because we have a lot of mental health issues on the streets. It's not just on the streets, but it is definitely a big aspect of what we're seeing on the streets, right?
Yes. And so similarly, I think at this point the estimate is about $100 million in federal funds are part of our city budget. And so as you talked about homelessness as a partnership project with the county, what are some of the areas you see there's opportunity to partner with the federal government to address some of our issues in Oakland?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a really tough climate at the federal government, and I don't think we really know how it's going to sort out there, including we've leaned in on HUD a lot for our housing, support with our housing. So, it's hard right now to understand as they go through the federal budget in a different way than we've ever seen before, and they make all these cuts. And, there's a lot of confusion about where this is going to sort out, and then politically, how much of an appetite there's going to be to help California cities like ours. But certainly in the past, there's always been the ability to create synergy with a new administration, even if it's a different party than is the majority here. There's always been synergy on certain issues. And so right now, with some of the things going on in DC, and look, the president's new in the job, and he's coming out strong. And there's a lot of stuff going on, and some of it's kind of like freaking people out. But in terms of how it's going to sort out in the next few months, it's hard for me to answer that question. Are we going to be able to work with them on infrastructure? That's a big thing we've always worked with the federal government on. Are we going to be able to work with them on transportation, and building roads? And the education thing is up in the air too, because there's efforts at the federal level to disband the Department of Education. So what impact is that going to have on states? There's a lot up in the air right now. It's a very difficult question to answer.
That's fair. I appreciate your honesty. Want to talk a little bit about kind of public safety and kind of infusing the budget a little bit. We've seen a narrative in the last 5 years or so of rising crime rates and crime-ridden cities, and there's social media web pages that just highlight Oakland as the place you don't want to go, right? There's TikTok videos of crime in Oakland, and as we've done some investigation, we found that some of these are kind of propped up by people who aren't actually citizens of Oakland and who really don't care about Oakland. And the sad part is that while this narrative is being perpetuated, we see, when we look at actual statistics, we see crime rates going down, right, over the past 3 to 5 years. And so as we look at our budget priorities, how do you see allocating budget funds towards public safety as well as community supports? And what are some of those interventions that kind of fill that gap between criminal intervention, enforcement intervention and community services? So, for example, there's a ceasefire program in Oakland. We have a neighborhood crime prevention unit. And so how do you see some of those more community-focused programs funded and prioritized, and how do you see them moving the needle in terms of the perception and the reality of the crime that we face in Oakland?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. There's so much going on with public safety. We could talk for hours about it, really. So I guess it would be helpful for me to summarize a few things, and then we can dig into specifically the ceasefire. So number one, we have a cultural collapse inside of OPD that Chief Mitchell straight up told us at a police commission meeting that our officers are doing as little as possible. There's a culture of fear inside the department, and we've had a collapse on the inside. Companies and organizations live or die by culture. You cannot recruit top people into your organization, and you cannot retain employees if you do not have a healthy culture. So we have a big problem there that the chief has called out, and we need to address that as a priority. And that's going to be the people managers. The responsibility of culture is your people managers, and it's the systems managing the department too. We can't just have systems that are on a high hill managing a department. There has to be this sort of two-way relationship where the employees, who, keep in mind, these are new people that are just graduating and they're coming into a culture and it's kind of messed up. So We have to fix that by putting the people managers and the systems, holding them accountable for a healthy work culture. The police commission is responsible for training and development, which is a core deliverable too of culture. So there's something there that has to be fixed. We have never had enough officers in Oakland. And last year before the pandemic, people were calling us from all over the place asking how we were doing this, because we did not have enough officers then. So something has changed, and that's what we really have to address on the inside of the department with this cultural problem. So moving into the ceasefire program with the DVP, so what people need to understand about ceasefire, it's a fantastic everybody loves that program, okay? I've never heard anybody say they didn't. However, the ceasefire program does not address all crime categories. They have a weakness, you know, they only address groups and gangs. And their age demographic is like 34. So what is very concerning in Oakland is that we're starting to see more and more juveniles commit violent crimes. 15, 17. We had a 9-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 15-year-old arrested for murder and accessory. So this is a problem. And it's like a twofold thing. Before the pandemic, we had a lot of activities going on in person in Oakland. You maybe knew this. I knew people coaching like 3 days a week, and they are not coaching at all right now. So the pandemic has resulted in a wipeout of some of these activities that were getting young people off the streets, and we need to get those back. And the city does give out a lot of money to organizations, so we have leverage with these organizations. And my opinion is that we may need to look at changing our focus in the DVP, because I think it used to be health. I think they used to be focused on health and wellness. I think we need to leverage some of our dollars to get these organizations in person, because I don't think all these organizations are in person. And then the DVP has sort of thrown all of its energy into ceasefire, I think 95%, and there's this gap over here that is starting to show up. So we've got to get the DVP to split its time and address the weaknesses of the program, because the weaknesses are people having emotional, people have weapons on them and they get in a fight and they start shooting, or they have something other on them. And so this is happening a little bit more than we would like, and it's a gap in the ceasefire because they don't deal with that crime category of these emotional crimes. So we do need to get some focus on that, and we do need to leverage every dollar with our investments to make sure we're getting as many in-person activities. And there was a strategy it was a data-driven strategy around hotspot areas where they would identify the time and the location of crime outbreaks. There would be like between this time and that time in certain districts, you would see more. And they would focus on that district for these activities. They were doing like City Nights was a program they started for those time periods, because a lot of these kids and they're getting pulled into this, and if we can get them focused on different things during these hotspot times, it does actually help reduce crime and violence.
Thank you for that. This is a special election. We know how we got here, right? And so the winner of this special election will serve the remainder of the term as Oakland mayor. And if you're successful, do you see yourself running for a full term?
I think so. I mean, look, if I'm successful at winning this election, I'm here for this city. You know what I mean? And it's like, we need the right person at the helm of this city who's going to be a game changer for Oakland and who's going to be able to change the trajectory of this city for a long time to come. I cannot understate what a huge opportunity this is for our city to rebrand Oakland and not just focus on being in survival mode, but to focus on a bold vision for the future that we can get everybody together to go after, right? And I think this is our time. I truly do. I think we've just been waiting for this moment to separate ourselves from San Francisco, to build a world-class city, and to grow the assets that are here and build the assets that are missing so that we can totally change the trajectory of Oakland for a long time to come. You know, it's like we have something very unique here, and we've let it get run down. We haven't really brought it out, you know, and it's like we need to kind of stop stewing in our problems in Oakland and start reaching for the future, you know, like that's where it's at.
So, Suze, I want to thank you for your commitment, the passion that you've demonstrated, the willingness to step up to a very tough position. And I really would like to know, win or lose, what is the legacy you would like to leave as an Oakland resident for fellow and following Oakland generations?
Wow, that's a big question, right? What is your legacy?
That's the question.
You know, I've always tried to walk a path for the highest good for all concerned. And whenever I have a problem, I always question myself, because sometimes that instant gratification you get when you're pursuing something for you isn't always as good of a payout as when you ask for the highest good for everyone, including you, right? And whenever I sort of go through that process, it always ends up being the right decision. And that's what I believe in for the city. Win, lose, or draw for this election, we need to leverage this whole process to change everything. And I'm here to help. You know what I mean? Like, I'm here for my neighbors. I'm here for people like you guys. I love what you're doing here. This intergenerational healing is just so cool, right? I mean, this is a really cool city, okay? With people who have so much power. I have met people in the trenches of this city, and I just can't even believe how lucky I am to know them. You know what I mean? It's like, whoa, you are a powerful person. And it's not the kind of power people might think of, you know, like, but it is power to me. And I think that's what really makes Oakland such an incredible place. So when you ask about legacy, man, I'm just humbled and lucky to be in this whole mix with so many cool people. And, you know, sometimes when people go through hard times too, it makes them powerful people, because all that shallow stuff just gets thrown out the window, you know, and suddenly you're in a place that's pretty meaningful and pretty powerful, and it underscores really what legacy is, right? It's like we're in this boat on the river of life, and we're in it together, and we're lucky to be there. You know what I mean?
And we got to get through that white water.
Got to get through it, man. Let's go.
Hopefully everybody's still on the boat.
Let's go forward.
Hopefully they're still on the boat on the other side.
Right.
So no, honestly, thank you so much, Suze Robinson. On behalf of the Brotherhood of Elders Network, thank you for your passionate and deeply thoughtful responses. Good luck in the campaign. And I'd like to end by saying thank you for responding to our call. We will be reaching out to you in the future, and we hope that you will be as responsive, and we are definitely here to respond to your call.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.